this message. I was told to deliver this message.
Assalamu alaikum, family. It's your brother Landon X, and this is NationTown TV Live. And as you can see, as always, right up there, we got our topic, which today we're doing something that I think is extremely important. We're dealing with the secret relationship, not between blacks and Jews. We'll be dealing with that as well, but we're dealing with the secret relationship between blacks and mental health. It's one of them issues we don't really like to talk about in our community, and we're going to go ahead and get it in today. We won't be on long, but let me go ahead and start off in the proper fashion. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, who appeared to us in the person of Master W. Fard Muhammad, to whom praises are due forever, plus 1,000 days as far as I'm concerned. I further bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger, with all due respect and love for the Holy Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be upon him, who revealed the Holy Quran over the span of 23 years, 1,400 years ago. With all due respect to him, the Holy Quran that he revealed tells us that certainly a messenger will be raised for every nation. And in our case here in the hills of North America, it is this beautiful man that you're looking at right here, and the same beautiful man you can see over my shoulder. But I would not know anything about this brother over my shoulder, and I would not know anything about Master Fard Muhammad if it were not for the divine leadership, guidance, and teaching of that beautiful brother right there, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. As I just said, divine leader, teacher, guide, Messiah in our midst, and criterion, if we understand. And in those three great names, I greet you in the words of peace. We say it in the Arabic language of Assalamu alaikum. Shout out to everybody chiming in. I see you, Brother Hakeem, Sister Valerie, Tevis, Muhammad, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Robert. All praises are due to Allah. We're going to get right into it. Thank you, Sister Valerie. I saw the comment, the title. The title is, something I feel like we need to deal with. We need to deal with. And I think Sister Valerie will like one of the aspects that we're gonna touch on just a little bit. I don't want to give no spoilers. But like I said, I won't be on for long. But I do want to encourage everybody that's watching to hit us up with questions and comments. But I felt the need. Allah guided me to want to touch on this today. We got a lot of stuff going on in the news. The enemy is still attacking the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. But one thing that I'm noticing that we kind of beating around the bush on, or tiptoeing through the tulips on, is mental health, particularly when it pertains to the Aboriginal people of this earth. And we just can't afford at this point to go any further, and we can't go any further unless we deal with it. And inshallah, we're going to break down a few points today. I don't expect this one episode of NationTown TV to solve our mental health problems. But, I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on it. And I don't think we've ever really touched on it on NationTown. We've been doing this for about 3 years now. And I think it's like they say back in the Old West, it's high time for us to deal with it. But with that said, let's go over some things that will let you know that it is high time to deal with mental health in our community. First of all, I don't even have to touch on any celebrity or anything like that. I don't care what city you live in, but particularly if you live in a larger city, and especially if you live in Los Angeles, mental health is an issue. A lot of it, I firmly believe, is chemically induced because I see the same types of mental illness amongst our brothers and sisters. The same kind of symptoms, the schizophrenia, the talking to themselves, arguing with themselves, so forth and so on. And it seems to really be getting to a point where it's not a laughing matter. And once it starts to ooze into the spotlight with celebrities and such, that's when it's definitely some time for us to talk about it. Because once it gets to that point, when you have these people who have millions of dollars and they're in front of the camera, which means that they have the means to cover up a lot of their flaws. They have a whole team around them that can make them look smarter than they are, more sane than they are, healthier than they are, cuter than they are. They got a whole team around them. So when you start to see the flaws of celebrities, then that lets you know that their situation is a lot worse than it even looks. So what was the motivation on this? Well, first and foremost, as you might even be able to guess, our brother Kanye West, back in the news. Apparently he claims he's running for president. I think he missed the deadline to file. You have to file to be able to run for president. So it may just be a publicity stunt. But he had his first campaign appearance in, I believe, South Carolina a few days ago. His emotions were all over the place. Now, keep in mind, I'm not picking on my brother. My brother has admitted that he's dealt with being bipolar. I believe he's been diagnosed, and he takes meds for it. But amongst other things, he made a very incendiary comment about Harriet Tubman, saying she really didn't free any slaves. All she did was transfer them from one white man to the next, and the disrespect behind that. But then also what you see here, he's literally crying I don't know if it's real tears or whatnot, but he claims that somehow he almost accidentally killed his own daughter. Now, he didn't go into any details that I know of that, but whenever you see someone constantly go through a range of emotions, that's a key, symptom of a mental illness. And we're going to go into some of the key elements and symptoms of mental illness, particularly some mental illnesses that we specialize in as black people. Another issue that's been in the news, our sister, Tamar Braxton, or Tamar, however she pronounces it. I have to admit, I've never watched the reality show that her family does, but our sister is going through it. I sifted through some of her tweets in the past, and I can just tell by her previous, social media commentary and social media posts that our sister is going through something. And this is the post that she made on Twitter that that raised a lot of eyebrows. She says, "I am a slave. I do not own my life, my stories, my pictures, my thoughts, or beliefs. I've asked my master to free me. I'm threatened and punished for it. The only way I see out is death. I will choose that before I continue to love like this." I don't know if she meant live like this or she meant to say love like this. And then she says, "Please help me." And then she was rushed to the hospital for an attempted suicide, as it was reported, at least. And then our brother Nick Cannon, we all know or should know the situation he was in. He was brought under fire by the mainstream media, particularly the so-called Jewish imposters. They put the full court press on him. I will say this, the video of his Cannon's class where he's interviewing the Jewish rabbi, I saw an excerpt. I haven't seen the full video. Not sure if I care to watch it, but I think I'll force myself to watch it just to be fair. But I did see an excerpt of it, and he did a commendable job, Nick Cannon that is, of still defending the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I posted it on my personal page, Landon X Collins. Go ahead, check that out. But I personally, I like what I saw from him. But a few days ago, I believe it was last week, he also sent out a tweet that was very disturbing. He said, "I hurt an entire community and it pained me to my core. I thought it couldn't get any worse. Then I watched my own community turn on me and call me a sellout for apologizing. Good night, enjoy Earth." And then there was a second post that I couldn't find, but in the second post, he doubled down on that sentiment of, goodbye, cruel world, that type of thing. And all jokes aside, these days when people say that, we got to take it seriously, and we did. And I'm proud to say that the FOI and the Nation of Islam here in Los Angeles, we checked on our brother to make sure he was all right. And he is, for what I understand. But me personally, between 6th grade and my senior year in high school, I personally know I had 3 classmates, all of them black, who committed suicide just between 6th grade and the 12th grade. That's just 6 years. That seemed like a long time when we was actually that age. But in 6 years, I had friends that I knew. One of them I was actually very close to that took their life, and the one I was close to was a young brother named Layman. May Allah be pleased. The thing about him was, if you just looked at him from the outside in, you would have no idea why somebody like him would take his own life. He was a ladies' man. All the females felt like he was attractive. He was a football star. He even had a cool job. He worked at Foot Locker. That's like the perfect high school job, especially for a young black man. So he was a popular athlete. Everybody liked him. Everybody. He wasn't that kind of person where only the people he hung around liked him. Everybody liked him. And I was very fond of my brother. And You know, I came to school one day, you know, everybody's crying, including his girlfriend at the time. And I found out, you know, that he had taken his own life. So suicide, which is always related to mental illness, is something that we also don't talk about. I think I'm gonna do a show about that specifically as well. So it's something that we gotta take serious. It's something that we have to respect when it pops up. We can't laugh at it. We can't be like, oh, it's a publicity stunt. They just want attention. Sometimes it's that. And sometimes their need for attention is so deep and so critical that it might still lead. It might still lead. You got to think about it. Like Nick Cannon, he's a child star. You know, and even before he got his first role, those child stars, they're going to auditions for years before they actually get a major role. And then you got someone like Tamara Braxton. She grew up in this famous family. Her sister's the star of the family. She's like, I guess, like the Tito of the family, and you know, and all the pressure. Everybody expects her to be able to sing like her sister and do this and do that. You know, so I'm not justifying what they're doing or trying to make anybody feel sorry for them. But when you have that kind of strange lifestyle on top of being black in the wilderness of North America, for white people, it's a struggle in those realms and in those situations. But when you throw being black in America on top of that, it can cause a whole other group of problems. So that's why I decided to get into mental health and really kind of dig into this a little bit. Once again, shout out to everybody chiming in. Let me see if I can pull up some of our beautiful NationTown TV viewers. Once again, Assalamu alaikum, Sister Valerie. She said, praise be to Allah. We checked on our brother Nick Cannon. I bear witness. We absolutely did. Sister Helen, assalamu alaikum for chiming in. Hold on just a minute, family, while I pull this up. Trying to pull up the comments. There we go. She says, Nick doesn't need to apologize. Tell the Jews to study the history. I know that's right. You know, shout out to Brother Richard. Peace and black power. Absolutely, all day, brother. Brother Hakeem says, assalamu alaikum. Thank you, just in time, because regular TV is boring while I'm cooking. All praises due to Allah, dear brother. So I'm going to jump right into it. First of all, let's kind of deal with mental health from a broad standpoint, from an overall standpoint, especially when it's dealing, you know, with our people. But as you can see on this diagram, it talks about stressors on diverse ethnic racial groups, you know, mental health disparity factors. And it says members of ethnic and racial minority groups in the U.S. fare a special and economic environment of inequality that includes greater exposure to racism, discrimination, violence, and poverty, all of which takes a toll on mental health. And that's from the United States Surgeon General. I don't think that's our brother Ben Carson. I think that was from the 80s. So, you know, when the U.S. Surgeon General, we know that the United States don't really give a damn about us, but when they have to bear witness of what we going through, that tells you a lot. And I'm also going to get into some other things like epigenetics. If you have not heard of it, we're gonna touch on that a little bit as well. But I gotta cover a couple of things. First of all, in some research that I did, back in slavery, there was a so-called medical expert named I believe Jonathan Galt, who felt like it wasn't important to even consider the mental health of black slaves, because he said that they're immune to mental illness because they don't own land. I'm going to say that again. He said that he felt like slaves were immune to mental illness because he felt like the only way you could be stressed out is if you had a mortgage to pay, or if you had slaves to tend to. And if you didn't have that, if you didn't, you know, have to tend to horses and cows and cotton fields and all of that, and I guess that's the only way you can have mental illness. That's coming from people who I think are the manifestation of mental illness, the Caucasian. But here's a fact that I ran into that was a little disturbing and also surprising. Hold on, yeah, right here it says, for people of African descent, little or no references are available about this condition, which is mental health or mental illness, before the 1700s. So before the 1700s, there was no record of mental illness amongst black people. Now, in that article that I was reading, it did not say just slavery. It said period. Which had me thinking like, okay, is that because they didn't give a damn, or they didn't do the research? Or is it because in our natural condition, in our natural environments, mental health is not an issue? And it only becomes an issue for us when we get around them. It could be that, and then it could also be just negligence, on their part of not actually giving enough of a damn to do studies on us or to do them accurately. Another thing that I have to point out is the fact that when it talks about slavery, because keep in mind, one of the things that Brother Kanye was, his comment, and I don't even want to get into what he said about Sister Harriet. It was so, at minimum, bad taste. At maximum, just flat out wrong, because he was actually 100% incorrect. Because in her helping facilitate the Underground Railroad, that laid the groundwork. There's a reason why immediately after the Emancipation Proclamation that the black towns like Black Wall Street immediately started to build. It wasn't because, slavery was ended and black folks just went straight to building cities. I mean, we did, but it was also some black folks who had a head start, thanks to the Underground Railroad. And they all went north and west. Oklahoma is west of the Deep South. So they all went north and west. In fact, I was reading a book from a survivor of Black Wall Street, and she pointed out that many of her forefathers, many of her grandfathers who came from sharecropping and slavery thought they were headed either to California or Canada. And, back then traveling wasn't as simple as just going online and buying a plane ticket or a train ticket or even a Greyhound. You had to foot it, go town to town, or if you had a mule, go from town to town. So a lot of them just happened to stop in Oklahoma, and that's where they set up shop and began, and the rest was history. And that's how Black Wall Street started. So she didn't just free them or take them to another plantation, or and she didn't have a job placement program. So when she freed you, it was on you what you was going to do. It's the same way as if I broke you out of prison. If I went and broke you out of San Quentin, I mean, damn, I broke you out of a Supermax prison. I got you off a level 4 yard. Now you want me to find you a job? Now you want me to feed you? Now you want me to put clothes on you? Brother, you on your own, man. You just give me my props for breaking you out of the queue. You know what I mean? So, but I ain't gonna get into that any further. But that just goes to show how our brother is going through it. And I love my brother. I love his music. I love his mind. But even when he tripping, I can see that God in him. But that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. But speaking of slavery, there are two other conditions that they diagnosed as slavery. One is absolute foolishness, but the other one has some truth to it. It actually has some truth to it, and I'm going to pull up another excerpt from this article that I was reading. Pay attention. It says other antebellum medical researchers promoted conditions such as drapetomania, which is literally a disease that caused enslaved blacks to flee their plantations. Oh, wow. You mean to tell me that they lost their minds so much that they could not understand being a slave, that they could not any longer, bale that hay and work from can't see in the morning to can't see at night. Wow. But then this second one right here deserves some further study and further analysis. It's called Dysesthesia Ethiopia. Dysesthesia Ethiopia, a disease that purportedly caused a state of dullness and lethargy, which would now be considered depression. You don't see that part on there, but it was basically an early form of depression that was attributed specifically to slaves and to slavery. And the interesting thing about that, it got me to thinking about a particular scripture in what we call the poison book, aka the Bible. But there's a scripture that got me to thinking about why would a slave, let's read that definition again. Why would a slave be dull and lethargic? Meaning that they're walking around with their head down, dragging their knuckles, don't want to work, don't want to do anything, don't want to entertain master, don't want to do everything the master say as quickly as the master wants them to do it. You know, that's almost as silly as drapetomania, but it got me thinking about this scripture in the Bible. This is from the book of Psalms, chapter 137, verses 3 and 4. It says, and I quote, "For there they carried us away captive and required of us a song. And they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion." Then it says, "How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land?" Anybody who's ever been sad, ever been depressed about anything, somebody get all in your face talking about, hey, do this for me, do that for me, do that dance you like to do this or do that. You ain't trying to hear that. That's just if you just having a bad day. But imagine if you're on a plantation, once again, working from can't see in the morning to can't see at night, the skin whipped off of your back, and you seeing your brothers and your sisters go through the same thing. You've seen siblings be sold to another plantation. You've seen siblings or even your own mother or even your own wife get raped constantly by the slave master. But you expect us to have pep in our step? And that's what that scripture is about. That's why I always tell people, don't completely dismiss the Bible. You know, we believe in the truth of the Bible. We just know that it has been tampered with, and it's been used to snare the minds of our people, as it says in the Muslim program in the back of every copy of the Final Call and the Muhammad speech that preceded it. So that popped in my head as soon as I saw that. But another thing that I ran into in that reading was an interesting fact about mental institutions and black people immediately after the Civil War era. It says most pre-Civil War mental health, actually this is pre-Civil War, most pre-Civil War institutions, mental health facilities, in the South usually barred the enslaved for treatment, barred us from treatment. Apparently, mental health experts believe that housing blacks and whites in the same facilities would detrimentally affect the healing of the whites in that same facility. I'm gonna read that again. Most pre-Civil War mental health facilities in the South usually barred the enslaved for treatment. Apparently, mental health experts back then believed that housing blacks and whites in the same facilities would detrimentally affect the healing of the whites. Not only could we not use the same restroom, not only could we not be buried in the same graveyard, but when we lost our minds, we were not allowed in the same mental institutions. And they believed that if we were brought into these mental institutions with white people, that would be detrimental to their mental health. Theirs. I'm gonna say that again, theirs. as opposed to ours. But you know, let me slow down a bit. Shout out to everybody chiming in, because I mentioned the Muslim program of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad that can be found in every copy of the Final Call newspaper. But there's one particular part, and believers that are watching know what I'm talking about. There's one particular part that we can't gloss over. In the Muslim program, we have 10 things that we want and 12 things that we believe. Right here, you see the fourth and the fifth. Number 4 is we believe in Allah's prophets and the scriptures they brought to the people. But then number 5 says, we believe in the resurrection of the dead, not in no physical resurrection, but in mental resurrection. We believe that the so-called Negroes are most in need of mental resurrection. Pay attention to that. He says mental resurrection. Mental resurrection. Now, what doesn't he say? He's not saying spiritual resurrection. He's not saying financial resurrection. We need that too. We need the spiritual too. But he says that we are most in need of mental resurrection. So this is the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad telling us off top that mental issues is something that we need to be concerned with. And I found that interesting, that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the messenger of God, the messenger of Allah at minimum, pointed that out to us a long time ago, that we are most in need of mental resurrection. Now, what we're going to do, shout out to everybody chiming in. Brother Richard Thompson says, shout out to Taraji P. Henson. She has set up a mental health foundation in honor of her father. All praises due to Allah. Shout out to Taraji. She's one of my favorite actresses. She also loves the minister as well. But shout out to that sister. That's a brilliant sister. She even reminds me of my biological sister. But shout out to our dear sister for that. That's beautiful. Sister Helen says we should not be surprised about this mental health illness. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said it would be days like this, even with the babies. Absolutely, and we're going to touch on that a little bit as well. But what I want to do, I want to break down a couple of things, because the fact of the matter is, I started off by saying that this was about this. I was inspired to deal with this subject based on our brother that you see right here, Brother Kanye. But let's keep it all the way 100 for a minute. Not only was it Kanye, it was Sister Tamar Braxton, Brother Nick Cannon, and many other situations. You have to keep in mind that while it could have been an actual assassination, you know, our brother Michael Jackson, as well as our brother Prince, they were on medications that, you know, that helped them deal with stress and other things. So it's not something that's uncommon in show business. But let's not act like Kanye, Tamar, Nick Cannon, and, you know, the homeless people that we see talking to themselves, that's the limit of black mental illness. In my own humble estimation, family, I think that at least 95% of black people in the wilderness of North America suffer to some degree of mental illness. Mental illness, like it is with something else that was put in us, the sickle cell disease. The sickle cell disease, I have a niece that suffers from sickle cell. But for those that don't know, the sickle cell disease has two tiers to it. You have those who actually have it, and then you have those who have the trait. And I think the same is the case with mental illness in the black community. It's those of us that are full-blown 5150, and then the rest of us have the trait. And at any moment, with the certain circumstances, we could really display that mental illness. And a lot of what we do absolutely proves that we have a mental illness. Me too. You. Mental illness. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take the most well-known elements of mental illness, and I'm gonna break it down to show you that you have a mental illness. Remember what the messenger said: we are most in need of mental resurrection, and I intend to prove that it would be the will of Allah. Check this out. Let's start with one of the. I'm gonna go through a few major components of mental illness, but I'm gonna break it down in a way that proves that we're dealing with it in a figurative standpoint as well as a literal standpoint. It's all literal, but I want you to just follow me a little bit on this. Let's start off with clinical depression. Now, from a clinical standpoint, clinical depression is the persistent feeling of sadness or loss of interest that characterizes major depression, can lead to a range of behavioral and physical issues. Now, I'm going to read that again. The persistent feeling of sadness or loss of interest that characterizes major depression and can lead to a range of behavioral and physical issues. Now, let me tell you a quick story. In Los Angeles, at Muhammad Mosque number 27, those of you who've ever been there, 8701 South Vermont, I can't wait for us to get back to having our meetings. But those who've ever been there, you know that there's a huge billboard at the top of the building that has the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and our beloved Western Regional Student Minister Abdul Malik Saeed Muhammad up there. And every time I bring a guest to the mosque, you know, I might mention that billboard or point it out to them. And I say 99% of the time, they didn't know it was up there. And I mentioned this to a brother one day, and he said, man, it's sitting right there. Why don't they see it? But let's go back to clinical depression. Why would they not see a billboard at the top of the building? The persistent feeling of sadness or loss of interest that characterizes major depression can lead to a range of behavioral and physical issues. And I told this brother when he asked that question, I said, well, brother, to see something on the top of a building, you have to be looking up. How many of our people are really looking up? When you're looking up, you're usually in a good mood. Our people are down. And not only that, but we on these phones all day, so we at that 30-degree angle all day. But also just our overall countenance is low and down. So we don't even look up to see things that are above our heads. That's why as a businessman, I would never pay for a billboard in the hood because our people don't look up. You know, we don't look up because of our condition. So I found that interesting about that particular aspect of mental health. And then there's anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorder, when you're anxious or when you're hyper. It says symptoms include stress that's out of proportion to the impact of the event. The inability to set aside a worry and restlessness. Now, come on now. I know you know and you've seen yourself as well as your people in this condition. And when you throw in the drugs that we take, the food, the chemicals and the food that we deal with, and the self-esteem issues that we have, this is what brings us to the gang violence and the black so-called black on black crime that we see in our community. That anxiousness, that anxiety, stressing over things that haven't even happened yet, but we just feel like it's going to happen. And these are usually negative things. The anxiousness of trying to figure out where we're going to get our next meal from, how we're going to pay the rent. See, these are real. Now, these are clinical things I'm going over, but these are real things that everybody we know in our community goes through. Let's see what else we got. Bipolar disorder, which is manic episodes that may include symptoms such as high energy, reduced need for sleep, and loss of touch with reality. Depressive episodes, loss of touch with reality. I will never forget, inshallah, unless I, take on a major mental illness, I pray that I never forget the first time I ever heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teach an entire lecture. It was October 16th, 1995, otherwise known as the Million Man March. I wasn't there, but I watched it on BET back when the B in BET stood for black, because it was black on. But I remember the minister saying in that lecture, and this snippet was also transposed and put on Tupac Shakur's last real album, Machiavelli, where he was talking to our celebrities. And he said, he used the exact words. He said, you're out of touch with reality. A few of you in a few smoke-filled rooms calling it the mainstream, while the masses of our people are suffering. I'll never forget that. He said, you out of touch with reality. And looking again at this definition of bipolar disorder, manic episodes may include symptoms such as high energy, reduced need for sleep, and loss of touch with reality. How many people do you know in our community that are out of touch with reality? Completely out of touch with reality. Their outlook on the world, the outlook on themselves, the outlook on the people around them, it's like, are they even here? And this is without drugs. This is without, counting the chemicals and the other things that's in the air, that's in the food, that's in the water. And we bear the brunt of that. But even if you don't count that, we deal with a particular form of mental illness that they haven't even really successfully diagnosed in any of these clinical studies. But I'm using these common clinical issues as a way to diagnose our people. Now here's another one. Dementia. Dementia. Symptoms include forgetfulness, limited social skills, and thinking abilities so impaired that it interferes with daily functioning. I'm going to read that again. Symptoms include forgetfulness, limited social skills, and thinking abilities so impaired that it interferes with daily functioning. Now keep in mind, all of the points that I'm bringing up, I'm drawing a line between our current condition and how we are and how we are dealing with each other. Not even those of us who've been clinically diagnosed, but also the literal diagnosis. I happen to know people that are black people that are dealing with clinical dementia. But in many ways, we also have a different kind. We have a Afro dementia amongst our people. First of all, I talked about forgetfulness. I'm gonna give you a very plain example of forgetfulness. Being in large crowds of white people proves forgetfulness amongst us. Have you ever been in a large crowd of white people? You ever been to a game? Ever been to the fair? Ever been to the movies? Ever been shopping in a grocery store in a white neighborhood? A mall in a white neighborhood? I know you have. Don't lie. You have. In fact, you prefer to do a lot of those things. You look forward to doing a lot of those things. That's dementia. That's dementia. And I point this out all the time because, history best rewards research. It's best qualified to reward research. And what that means is really looking into history to really see faults, but also opportunities. But when you look back on all the 200 plus towns that were started by black people immediately after slavery, immediately, do the math on Black Wall Street for a minute. Black Wall Street was burned down in 1921. It was bombed and attacked in 1921. The Emancipation Proclamation went into effect in 1865. So let me see, that's 46 years. That's almost no time flat that they built Black Wall Street up to the point that white people, remember that Black Wall Street name was given to Black Wall Street not by us. A lot of us didn't even know about it. I remember in high school, a lot of people didn't know about it. It was the internet that really spread the word about it. But it was white people. It was a white news publication. I think the New York Times that gave it that name. So in less than half of a century, they built up this little nothing into Black Wall Street. Another reason, aside from them really just wanting to have their own, another reason that I believe these 200 plus towns were established is because they did not have dementia. They knew this white man. They knew who he was. They knew how evil he was. And they said, man, we got to get the hell away from him. And we must have our own. But right now, in America, our people have Afro dementia. We want to send our children to learn around these people. We can't wait. We see it as a badge of honor and success to live amongst these people. We think their ice is colder. We think their money is greener. That is dementia. How soon we forget. Slavery wasn't that long ago. Sister Dr. Ava Muhammad, the national spokesperson for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, mentioned something Sunday that had never really dawned on me. That the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is the grandchild of slaves. So that shows you that slavery wasn't as far back as you think. This man's grandparents, everybody that's watching this has some kind of relationship with your grandparents, right? This man's grandparents were slaves and sharecroppers. So it wasn't that long ago. So we have dementia when we don't see anything wrong with not only being around this beast, but so freely spending our money with this beast. Let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving. What else we got? What else we got? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD or ADD. We've all heard this before. I personally believe that this is, on a clinical level, that this is BS. I think it's BS. But if it is any truth to it or reality to it, when you look at the world we live in, everything about the world right now feeds into having an attention deficit disorder. Even this that we on right now, the internet, if it's used improperly, can cause attention deficit disorder. All these distractions that we're around, it makes it hard for us to pay attention. But again, the dope that we smoking, the dope that we popping, the food that we eating, the so-called food that we eating, is also feeding into this. But attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the symptoms include limited attention and hyperactivity. Limited attention and hyperactivity. I mean, man, going back to the distractions. How easily distracted are we today? Speaking of celebrities, all it takes is some news story to take our eye off the prize, to take our eye off the bullseye. All it takes is for Jada Pinkett to get entangled. All it takes is for Kanye West to give some fake, interpretation of Black history. All it takes is for there to be a rap beef. That's why I thank Allah for this COVID-19. I really do. And that's no disrespect to those who have lost their life. As the minister taught us, they're martyrs. But the beautiful thing about COVID-19 is that it's caused the whole world to slow down and pay attention for a minute. It's like Allah. That's how you know that our grandparents and our mothers are connected to Allah. Because it's just like your grandma or your mama would say to you when you bouncing around with all that hyperactivity, boy, sit your ass down and be still. The whole world has been forced to sit our raggedy behind down for a minute and be still. Now there's another one that we're going to deal with. And this one, well, we got a couple more I'm going to deal with real quick. Like I said, we won't be on long. Obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, often centers on themes such as a fear of germs, or the need to arrange objects in a specific manner, and it has multiple symptoms to it. Now y'all might be thinking, brother, how is it? What definition are you gonna give for Afro OCD? How is it that we have Afro OCD? Well, when you really around your people, especially if you're in a city like Los Angeles or Chicago, and you really around your people, let's look at gang culture for a minute. Remember what OCD is. A quick example of OCD is like somebody who at work, that one coworker you got, they gotta have their pens over here sitting at a certain angle. They gotta have their files stacked up like this and like that. They gotta walk into a door a certain way. They gotta knock on the door a certain amount of times. And we look at that kind of stuff, we say, man, that's crazy. They must have OCD. Well, in the hood, we have symptoms of Afro OCD. Let's look at gang culture. You ever noticed a brother who just happens to be a Crip, and he refuses, no matter how intelligent he is, he refuses to spell a word that has CK in it. He has to spell it with 2 C's. That's OCD. If he got his blue flag in his back pocket, it gotta be in the left back pocket. And if he see it in your pocket and it's not in the right pocket, it's in the right side where it should be on the left, he banging on you. For some reason, he want to know where your mama stay. For some reason, he want to know where your grandma stay. That's OCD. That's OCD. I mean, clinically, if you broke that down, that is OCD, and be willing to fight over it. Go to your coworker at work that must have their pen sitting on the edge of their desk in a certain fashion. Go and knock that pen off their desk and see what happens. They're going to be ready to fight. Now send a text message to your homie that's that claims 60s, that claim Hoover, and just send a bunch of words that end in CK. They got CK in the name. He gonna hit you up. He gonna respond to the text, but then he gonna give you a little disclaimer saying, "Hey, cuz, next time you send me a text, cuz, take all them K's out, homie." Because to them that means Crip killer. That's OCD. We might think it's cool. We might think, oh, that's just hood culture. No, that's OCD. You just ain't diagnosed it. You just ain't realized it. And that's one of the clearest symptoms of having any problem, is not even realizing that you have a problem. And I say that, and also our family, our street organization family that are Bloods. Everything start with a B. Brazy. Man, that dude brazy as hell. He what as hell? Brazy as hell. You mean crazy? Nah, Blood. He brazy as hell. That's OCD. And if you ever been around a brother that's really extra like that, they really be that. They really be on that. They'll stop you mid-sentence. That's OCD. Gangbanging itself is a mental illness in the way that it's carried out. Because most of these gangs actually started off with a very conscious beginning. A lot of these gangs were formed to protect our neighborhoods from white intruders and to build a sense of community and brotherhood. But as it's carried out today, gangbanging in itself has many signs of mental illness. Moving along, there's one that I think I skipped that I gotta come back to. Oh yeah. Schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is characterized by thoughts or experiences that seem out of touch with reality. Mama, there go that word again, out of touch with reality. Disorganized speech or behavior. I think we just talked about disorganized speech. But going back to that, schizophrenia is also when we have delusions of grandeur. Unfortunately, and I heard the minister teach on this in a lecture that I was watching yesterday, unfortunately, so many of our dreams and perceptions of ourselves that are positive They're only between our ears. And a lot of us don't even believe that they can go any further than between our ears. So a lot of us, we think that we're more than what we are, but it never gets beyond our eyeballs, never gets beyond our mouth, never gets beyond our ears. So we have these delusions of grandeur. I'm this, I'm that. I'm a real nigga. I'm this or I'm that, or I can do this, I can do that. But you never see them taking steps to really manifest that. And some of us think that we're a master of everything. And you see it sometimes in what we do. We sometimes we're like a jack of all trades and a master of none. One week the brother want to start a barbershop. He want his own barbershop. The next week he want a record deal. The next week he want to play in the NBA. The next week he want to do this. The next week they want to do that. That's schizophrenic. You out of touch with reality. Not saying that you can't do any of those things, but there's a certain process you got to go to do that. And once we run into any type of difficulty, then it's off to the next thing. That's a sign of schizophrenia as far as I'm concerned. Now, this last one I'm going to have to translate, because I know we understand how we suffer from this. Post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD. Symptoms may include nightmares or unwanted memories of the trauma, avoidance of situations that bring back memories of the trauma. But see, I'm not comfortable with that name. I think a better name is post-traumatic slave syndrome. Post-traumatic slave syndrome. How do we get post-traumatic slave syndrome? I mean, we don't even have to talk about slavery itself. We can just talk about some of the things we went through after slavery. The kind of things we saw after slavery. The kind of treatment that we received after slavery. And while going through all of this, we put our hope in our God and in religion, and whatever, even in our leaders. And look what they did to our leaders. Look at what they did. I mean, this would cause, because think about it. When someone comes from a war battleground or a theater of war, from Afghanistan or Vietnam, they deal with seeing their comrades, their fellow soldiers getting murdered. They deal with constantly being, chased or hunted by the enemy combatants. In Vietnam, they called them Charlie. In the Desert Storm in Afghanistan, they called them insurgents. Here in America, we dealing with Charlie and insurgents. We have fallen comrades, do we not? Ill treatment. And we're seeing all of this play out almost on a weekly or monthly basis. And the babies are not exempt. The babies are not exempt. 15-year-old Latasha Harless was shot in the back of the head by an LA shopkeeper. This, from what I hear from actual black folks that are born and raised here in Los Angeles or were here at that time, she is the real reason for the LA uprising, not Rodney King. She was. The Rodney King was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Look this up. I ain't gonna get into it too much right now, but look that up. And what does that cause? You see war movies. You ever seen these war movies where, I think it was Full Metal Jacket with the big husky white boy who they were picking on, and even the drill sergeant was picking on him. He said, "Where you from, son?" I said, "I'm from Texas." He said, "Texas? The only thing they make in Texas are steers and queers." That's one of my favorite movies, but they was picking on him, and he lost his mind in basic training. He didn't even get to the war yet. He lost his mind in basic training, shot the drill sergeant, and then blew his own head off. That's PTSD. That was instant PTSD that happened on that movie. And now we're dealing with PTSD. So what kind of things are we doing? What kind of things are we doing in our communities after all of this? After this, after that, after this, after that, after that, after that. That leads to this. So, and it ain't no easy button to it. We are dealing with absolute. We can't sugarcoat it. We can't sugarcoat it. We absolutely cannot sugarcoat it. We are a mentally ill people. At this point, I kind of made a pact. I told my wife this the other day. I made a pact with myself that I no longer laugh when I'm driving down the street and I see what we call a 5150, which is the police code for somebody that has a mental illness. For a couple of reasons. One, is not funny, because like I said, 95% at least of us have some kind of mental illness. And then second of all, I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know if I'm looking at somebody who was chemically induced to act that way. And then I don't know what story I'm looking at. When you see somebody with a mental illness, you don't know what they survived. You don't know what they've been through. In fact, what you're probably looking at is somebody who survived something that would have killed you. Something that would have made you blow your head off. Something that would have made you jump off a bridge. But for them, they were so strong that it only made them argue with themselves and live out of a cardboard box and eat out of a trash can. Where if that same thing would have happened to you, child molestation, being raped in prison, being sent to some war zone on the other side of the world, and seeing your comrades get their heads blown off, and then when you came back home, they didn't even want to give you proper medical treatment, didn't want to pay you the money that you deserved, they were still treating you like a nigga. That'll drive anybody crazy. So I'm at the point now where it's not funny to me no more. It's not funny. It's a real issue that we have. Now, on NationTown TV, we like to not only deal with problems, and we got plenty of them in our community, but we like to deal with solutions. But before we get into solutions, family, first of all, shout out to everybody chiming in. Sister Helen says that's a lot of people who have OCD since the virus. I know that's right. Brother Richard says, I can't help but think of the trauma of the Middle Passage. Good God Almighty. That's why we still here. The Middle Passage, I'm going to pull a little bit of positivity out of the Middle Passage. Because you're talking about stacks of stacks in the holds of slave ships. If the slave or slaves up above your head that was stacked above you, when, not if, when they defecated, when they urinated, when a sister was on her menses, and that menstruation came pouring down, that feces came pouring down, it came pouring down right on you. And then when they brought you up for so-called for air, the sisters were raped, the men were beaten. Now some of them jumped overboard. And one thing I didn't like about the movie Black Panther, and that little quote that everybody likes to say from the character that Michael B. Jordan played, where he said he would rather, die in the water than, like his ancestors did, and then continue being a slave, however it went. The thing I don't like about that is that it insinuates strength in suicide. Actually, it doesn't. The reason why, all that stuff I just showed you, we've survived all of this. We survived all of this. And then not to even mention the fact that we have the worst health care, we have the least amount of money, we have the worst education, the public education that they give us, our private education that we have in our communities, like the MUI, is top notch, but we don't support that like we should. But even though we have the worst of the worst, we have a positive birth rate, meaning that for every one black person that dies, about 2 of us are born, in spite of all that. Whereas white people who have the best education money can buy, they have the best health care, they live in the best so-called neighborhoods, they can afford the best foods, they have a negative birth rate. One of the reasons of that is the Middle Passage. Because the Middle Passage was the first gauntlet that we cleared, the first gauntlet that we overcame. That means that those of us that are descendants of slaves walking around America right now are some of the strongest willed people on the earth. That's why you can't get me to try to put no cuts on slavery. It's a terrible occurrence. But I'm proud of being a descendant of slaves. I'm not one of these people who wanna mess around with black history. Oh, well, we weren't all slaves. Yes, we were. Oh, well, we really the Native Americans. Do you know anything about Native American history? Do you know what they did to them? So you're going from the hot plate to the skillet either way. The only difference is a different grade of hair. And for a lot of us, that's enough. That's good enough for us. But we are the descendants of the strongest people to ever walk this earth. For you to get through the Middle Passage, today we complain about a long plane ride. We complain about traffic. Imagine the Middle Passage. So the fact that our ancestors made it through that is one of the reasons why we're still here. We shouldn't be here. It should be like 5 Negroes walking around America right now. We should be damn near extinct. But it's 2 things working in our favor. For one, God is working in our favor, but we don't believe in nothing spooky on NationTown TV, because the science of it is we actually endured something that no other people on this earth has ever endured or probably could endure. But let's touch on that though, because that's a perfect segue to the next thing I want to deal with. The Final Call newspaper did a fantastic article, and get your digital subscription of the Final Call, finalcalldigital.com. This was from August 2019. Slavery's hellish holdover. But what it dealt with was epigenetics. Epigenetics, which essentially means black people are born traumatized. Now, the more clinical definition of epigenetics is essentially the study of changes in organisms caused by modification of genes, expression rather than attraction of the genetic code itself. Now, to put it in layman's terms, the more simplified terms, epigenetics is the study of biological mechanisms that alter genes, and those alterations can be passed down from one person to the next for generations. Generations. And this diagram right here breaks it down. As you see at the top, these are all the things that we deal with. Nutrition issues, stress issues, toxicant issues, pathogens, other issues. And then environmental cues, that orange over, environmental cues, meaning things in our environment that cue us or trigger us, as it's taught in the technology, that trigger us, and then it's passed down, as you can see, through generations. Through generations. Now, before we close, I want to hear from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. It's a recording, a video recording. It's not actual video, but it's a recording where he's talking about dealing with stress. And before we get out of here, I want you to listen to this very carefully. This is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan talking about dealing with stress, which is really probably the biggest symptom of our mental illness here in America. Take a listen.
Say something before I sit down. I would say this. One of the greatest pressures that human beings are subjected to today is called stress. All of us labor under stress. Our homes reflect our stress. Our relationships, one with the other, reflect the degree of our stress. The way we handle the problems in our homes and with our children and our interpersonal relationships is largely due to how we handle stress. So I asked myself one day, what is stress?
Come on, man.
It is pressure on the mind beyond what the mind and body is able to bear, or pressure on the body that limits its development, limits its ability to function, and creates dis-ease or lack of harmony in the members of the body. Stress. I relate stress to duty. I'm going to say that again. Each one of us is created by God with a duty, an obligation, something we are bound to do.
That's right.
And stress that is natural is based upon the problems of life, but we compound those natural problems of life when we default in duty. We add stress to stress, and that begins to break us down. So the only way to get out from under stress is to look at what is my duty. What am I obligated to do? And then ask the question, am I doing what I am obligated to do? And if I don't do what I'm obligated to do, how much stress am I placing on myself? Above and beyond the normal and natural stress of a righteous person, or one who's attempting to be righteous, living in a world of evil. Now, each human being is a creature of duty. We say, I love you. Yeah. But then default in duty.
Think about it. Think about it.
Well, love is not measured by how many times we say it. Love is measured by how well we perform our duty to the person or persons whom we say we love. You see, the duty of the MGT is laid out in question number 14 of lesson number 1. It's true. How to keep house. How to keep house.
All praises due to Allah. I love the way the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan attributed stress to being derelict in duty. Now, you might be thinking, well, what does that have to do with mental health? Is that the solution? We just need to get out and just work? Well, let's think about it. First, let's go to our lessons in the Nation of Islam, our supreme wisdom lessons. We have a lesson called Lost Found Muslim lesson number 2, question number 18, which asks the question, what is the duty of a civilized person? There's that word again that the minister mentioned, duty. What is the duty of a civilized person? And the answer is to teach the uncivilized, who are savage. Civilization, which is righteousness, the knowledge of himself, the science of everything in life, love, peace, and happiness. And then the question is asked in number 19, if a civilized person does not perform his duty, what must be done? In our lessons say, if a civilized person does not perform his duty, which is teaching civilization to others, they should be punished with a severe punishment. Think maybe that's what we going through right now, a severe punishment. You know that old saying, each one teach one? Maybe that's what we going through. Each one is not teaching one. We all know a little, but that's enough that if we all taught each other and we all not talked down to each other, not berated each other, not lectured each other, but if we really just looked out for each other, that would be a huge cause toward dealing with this mental issue, with this mental health issue, because we would come with actual processes, actual technology that can help us. I said technology. Now, there's been some naysayers and talk around the Nation of Islam about our use of a technology called auditing and Dianetics. And what I find funny about that, it reminds me of when you watch on movies, and some of you maybe even seen it with your own eyes. Have you ever seen someone get committed to an insane asylum? You know, when they're told that they have to be committed to a mental institution. A lot of times on the movies, and I assume in reality, the person is being committed, no matter how 5150 they are, they ain't trying to hear that. So they go out the door kicking and screaming. And when they get to the mental institution, they still kicking and screaming until they give them some type of medicine to calm them down. That reminds me of us. We know we crazy. We know we've been through a lot. We know we stressed out. We know we have all the clinical symptoms of mental illness. But when someone comes with just something to help us out with it, then we start cherry picking. No, I ain't gonna do that. No, I ain't gonna do that. No, you ain't gonna make me do that. No, you ain't. That makes you sound even crazier. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, this is the part where I bring up an excerpt from the book Dianetics. This is the part where I bring up something from L. Ron Hubbard. This is NationTown TV. We don't ever do what you expect us to do. I'm going to stay on that point, but I'm going to stay on that point through the Holy Quran. What? Yeah, the Holy Quran. Let's go into the Holy Quran, because there's a particular ayat in the Holy Quran that reminds me of how we want to cherry pick the solutions to things. We all know we have problems, but then when it's time to get to the solutions, now we want to say, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, oh, that'll never work, that'll never, even though you've never actually done it or never actually looked into it. I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about, when we were telling you just to go into the Quran, I ain't with all that religion. We was telling you to look into your poison book. I ain't with it. When we was just telling you to eat better. Because the way you eat, you actually eat, put things in your mouth, that determines your thinking as well. Everything we've given you, you cherry picked it. Now look at our condition. Well, let's look at the Holy Quran. In the Holy Quran, this is actually Surah 65, 2 and 3. This is the bottom part of Ayat 2 in the whole third ayat. And it says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and whoever keeps his duty to Allah, he ordains a way out for him, a way out of anything. And then the third ayat says, and gives him sustenance from whence he imagines not. From whence he imagines not. And whoever trusts in Allah, he is sufficient for him. Surely Allah attains his purpose. Allah indeed has appointed a measure for some things. Oh, wait. For a couple of things. Oh, no. That's not what it says. For everything. For everything. He gives him sustenance from whence he imagines not. What that means, family, is Allah will bring you the solution to your issue. And it'll come from directions that you imagine not. That you're not even in your right mind to even understand. Because let's be clear, if you had all the answers, you wouldn't be in this condition. None of our conditions. And, the mental health is just a foundation. But we got plenty of problems. We got financial problems. We have familial problems. Our families are busted up. But whenever someone comes to us with a solution, the first thing we want to say is what's not going to work. We're using deductive reasoning. If you are so clear on what's not going to work, then you should have a better understanding of what does work. And you clearly don't. So we got to use everything at our disposal, but keep our duty. Keep our duty to Allah. What is our duty to Allah? Each one teach one. Live right, eat right. Take care of your people. Love yourself. That's how you keep your duty to Allah. And as long as we continue working on that, Allah will show us many other avenues to help us deal with all of the issues that we have, even this mental health issue. I want to thank everybody for chiming in. I appreciate y'all holding it down with me, the whole NationTown family. Shout out to Brother Joseph Whalem. He says, teach wisdom, my brother. May Almighty God Allah keep and bless you and my family members. All praises due to Allah. Likewise, dear brother, thank you for the support. He also says, we're all true. The way to living Jesus. I know that's right. The living Jesus and the living God. All praises due to Allah. Make sure y'all, everybody watching, make sure you share this message. Just hit that little share button down there and get this message out there. I know this wasn't one of the more sexier topics on NationTown TV, and y'all probably thought I was gonna sit on here all day talking about, which way is up when it concerns Kanye West or some other celebrity. Listen, man, that's another sign of mental illness. We talked about distractions, right? That's a mental illness. It ain't just a flaw that we have in our community. It's a mental illness. You'll be surprised how many mental illnesses there are out there. Some of them are BS and fake. Some of them are actually real. And we suffer from a lot of it. But I thank you for your time, family. Until next time, same black time, same black channel. We're going to hit you up on NationTown TV. All praises due to Allah. So I'm going to leave you as I greeted you in the words of peace. Hey, salam alaikum.
I was told to deliver this message. I was told to deliver this message.